Hi, good evening, everybody. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the IOSH Southwest branch webinar on intellectual humility. My name is James, and I am the IOSH branch chair for the Southwest. I would now like to hand you over to Simon, who will take it away. Simon, it is over to you.
Thank you very much, James. I'm just going to share my screen so we can hopefully all see that. So let's have a look. Get to that one. There we go. So we're going to start. Thank you very much to everybody for attending tonight. I don't know what your weather's like near you, but I suppose if it's a sunny night, it may be difficult for you to turn up. But thank you very much for turning up. I really appreciate that. Intellectual humility. I mean, really, what does it mean? We're going to explore as much as we can in the time that we've got tonight. But firstly, I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. I'm Simon. I've been a member of IOSH for a while now. I don't know how long, 15 years, something like that. I don't know. And I must admit, I'm very proud of being a member of IOSH. I had to work quite hard, to get qualified, and and I've done lots of experience. I've got lots of experience in lots of different areas. One thing I've realised over the years is the more I know, the more I realise that I don't know. And I know other people say that, and it's not just a throwaway statement, it's true. Initially I was in the army for a bit, and then I joined the fire service, and I finished off as a station officer in Greater Manchester Fire Brigade. And then I left there. I was involved in an accident and various things, whatever. And I ended up setting up IOSH many years ago now, about 20 years ago. One thing that I'm really passionate about is when I do something, I'd like it to be of a good quality. Now, I fail along the way, but I've always tried. It's never been through a lack of trying. And I had a bit of a eureka moment about 8 years ago. It was 2008, actually, so a bit longer than 8 years. I had a bit of a eureka moment. I read a report from the Health and Safety Executive had commissioned, and it was about manual handling, and it was about how effective was training at changing behaviour. So I read the report, and I got to sort of the meaty bit at the end, and then basically the conclusion was this, is that training on its own is 0% effective or highly ineffective at changing people's behaviour. And that started my journey. I thought, I've got to do something different, because the idea of just providing people with information and then assuming that people will follow it is false based on that research. So as part of the journey, I've studied various different things along the way, but I've just completed my 5th year of a degree in philosophy and psychology. I've always been interested in philosophy, but it's only recently that I've studied it formally. Before that, it was read and think and have a chat to people. But what I found that the more I read about philosophy and the more I learn, the more I realise it is vital to our ability to operate as health and safety people or leaders. Our ability to think philosophically will define our future, will define, in my opinion, and that's only my opinion, will define our ability. And one of the aspects that I found particularly interested in, is, why do we believe that we know something? And that brings me to intellectual humility. And today we're going to have a run through. But before we go through that, we've got some questions for you. So if you wouldn't mind just having a little look at the questions, and it gives us some idea of why you decided to come along to the webinar this evening. I'll put the washing up question down, because you never know. Maybe that's the reason why you're here, and somebody's saying, come and do the washing up. I can't, I've got a webinar. I've got to do that webinar, that's important. So maybe we've got some experts in the room, maybe we haven't, I don't know. So it'd be really good for me to get some kind of a background understanding of who've we got at the webinar this evening. So, okay, so it's a relatively new term as far as I'm aware, intellectual humility. But I must admit, I am actually hearing more and more, probably because I'm aware of the term, but prior to that, maybe it was around anyway. But I'm more and more hearing this term. The BBC have just done a very small film about it, and I'm starting to hear more and more noise about intellectual humility. So I can't vote. Right, okay, let's see if we've got our... we've got 2% who want to get out the washing up. It'll still be there at the end of it, to be honest. So there you go. It doesn't do itself, does it? Let's have a look. We haven't got any experts, okay. And yeah, okay. And some people are not sure really. So I think generally we've got a sort of starting point to build on. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're going to cover today then. So we've got 5 main areas, and they'll overlap, these areas. They won't just be one will end and the next one will begin. Like I say, they'll be overlapping. And we're going to look at a case study, an imaginary case study to try and help us through this. So we're going to really try and sort of get our heads around, what do we mean by intellectual humility? We're going to look at how that may relate to virtues. And I'm not sure if anybody managed to have to attend the previous webinar that I did about virtue, about ethics and morality. So just a little bit of a refresher on that. We'll look at knowledge. What do we mean by knowledge? Biases, and we'll finish off by having a look at disagreements. So in order to help us do this, what we're going to do is we've got this imaginary company. It's not based on any true facts or any people I've ever met or anything like that. It's imaginary. And I thought if we do it as a story, it might help. It's definitely helped me as I've been preparing the presentation. It's definitely helped me put intellectual humility into a context of a leader and possibly a health and safety person or a worker. So we've got this business, Intum, they're called. No prizes for figuring out how we got the title. And what they do is the manufacturing. We've got quite a big business. We've got over 2,000 employees. We make things, we distribute them, we get products in, that kind of thing. And we're very lucky that we've got some members of the team there from Intum to help us today. And we've got, let's have a run and see who they are. So we've got Marcus. Marcus joined the company as an apprentice. And he's done all his apprenticeships now, and he's an electrical engineer, mechanical and electrical engineer. He's in his mid-20s. He's a good member of the team, and he enjoys what he does. Bob's been there, man and boy. He's been there, joined at 14, back in the day when he didn't go to school after that age. He's been there many years. He's a very experienced engineer, and over the last 10 years, he's sort of moved into the health and safety team. Luca is a supervisor. He works on a line, and Luca has also been with the company for a while now. He's got a background in engineering as well, and Luca's sort of in his mid-30s. Mary's one of the senior management team, and she specialises in planning, and she specialises in finance. But she's been with the company a few years now. She's highly qualified and is a really good and approachable member of the team. So there we go. So we met the team, and during the session today, we're going to come back to the team and look at how intellectual humility could affect them in their role. Okay, so what does it mean? Well, do you know what? Like a lot of philosophical subjects, it's not that easy to pin down. You read some people who are very learned, very knowledgeable people, and they say intellectual humility is this, and other people say it's that. And I'm not going to attempt to look at all the different possible versions of what intellectual humility means. But if we think about it in its broadest of terms, if we think about why do you believe the things that you do? And if you, having said that, why I believe them, do I also recognize that it may be wrong? Changing your mind and going, well, do you know what? I don't believe that anymore. That's not about being weak. It's about getting it right. If we're preoccupied with being right, then we may lose the opportunity to get it right. Because however good we are, and there's going to be some, various different levels of competency in the webinar room tonight, all of us, there will be times when we believe we're right and we're not. So to change our mind, be open to new ideas, is not weakness, not in my opinion. It's about maintaining this growth mindset. So am I interested in being better in the future than I was in the past? Am I open to learning? How do I react to when people question my opinions? Well, I believe this. Well, okay, well, how do I react with that? And there's a phrase which I've learnt in that philosophers use, and it's called charitable. Be charitable when we look at other people's ideas, when we look at other people's beliefs or opinions or their versions of knowledge. Okay. It's a social process. It involves learning not only from books and maybe even experience, but from others as well. And it also focuses on evidence. So what do we believe is valid evidence? What's good? What needs a bit more inquiry, and what isn't good? And there we're finishes off there. We're also, is it a virtuous trait? So we're going to explore all these things, and hopefully in a little bit more depth. So the primary source of my learning has been through three courses, three-week courses, building on top of the philosophy study that I've done, through Edinburgh University. And I would advise anybody who would like to know more about intellectual humility to try and do those. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, where you might be able to get access to that learning. But it definitely aligns itself to virtuous, for being virtuous. So what do we mean by it then? And I'm not going to spend too long on each of the different accounts of intellectual humility. I'm just going to focus on one in particular. So if we look at this, the teacher, Dr. Ian Church, he briefly outlines three different accounts of intellectual humility. And the first one is what's called low concern for status account. So basically what that's saying is, that's saying that, okay, well, you display a level of intellectual humility if you're interested in the knowledge itself, the intellectual goods, rather than being praised as being excellent in your field or whatever. So it's about the intellectual goods. It's about the knowledge and the learning. That's what's more important. And if that's who you are, then you demonstrate intellectual humility. Another one is another account is a limitations owning account. So this involves the ability to be able to recognize and judge your own intellectual strengths and weaknesses. And at the bottom there, it's got the names of the main researchers who've written books and carried out research, and they've come up with their own accounts. But the one that I'm particularly interested in was what's called the doxastic account. And this is an account that Dr. Church has explained on the course of the 9-week course, three-week courses that I've attended. Okay, so let's try and break this down then. And we're going to do this by going back to the team. They're going to help us break this down. What does he actually mean by this? So let's have a look. So I've adjusted the some of the learning materials that Dr. Church provided, and you can see there we've got a bit of we've got a graph there, a bit of a scale. Top part of the scale is a term called intellectual arrogance, and I think for some people, myself included, that seems a little bit inflammatory, that statement. But arrogance is something that I think that many people would be uncomfortable with being described as being arrogant, myself included, I think. I think I'm warming to the idea of recognising it and seeing it for what it is, rather than taking offence. But anyway, and the other end of the scale is a thing called intellectual servility. Now, on our X and our Y axis, so if you look at our vertical axis there, we see it says ascribed positive knowledge status. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, it means this. It means, how good do I think the knowledge that I have is? So how good is it? Is it really valuable, excellent knowledge? And I can be really sure of that, and I can be confident in it. And along the bottom, we've got the actual positive knowledge status. So I could believe that, so an example here, there we go. So Bob is going to help us with this. So let's imagine Bob believes that, and that's what the red star stands for, Bob believes that his knowledge is excellent in a particular field. He thinks he's right up to date, he knows it in and out, and he's absolutely fantastic. But the reality is, he may have a belief of that, but in one example, Bob may be incorrect. He may give the value or the status of his knowledge more credibility than it actually deserves. So when you actually look at, you see the bottom line, the horizontal line there, the actual knowledge status of Bob's knowledge is actually a lot lower than he believes it to be. We'll sort of explore how we could get ourselves in a bit of trouble there about giving advice where we weren't competent to do so. At the other end of the scale, we can see if Bob was unable to recognise that he was competent to give advice, so what he has got is, he has actually got a very lot of knowledge, and he really does understand the issue at hand, but he's confident in it, and he goes, oh, well, I'm not really sure I know enough about this to give anybody any advice. So that would be called intellectual servility. So what we really want is for Bob and all of us to be as close to that midline as possible, where we can actually ascribe the value of our knowledge the correct level. So an example of that would be, so let's imagine then Bob is giving advice and he was competent to do it. He recognised that he had this knowledge. He knew that he knew what he was talking about. And so, so he's definitely got good sources of evidence there. And he gives it the amount of status that it requires. He doesn't think it's better than it is, but he doesn't think it's worse than it is. And because of that, Bob he fits quite nicely on our intellectual humility scale. On the other end of the spectrum, Bob recognised there may be an issue in his workplace, and Bob has recognised that actually, do you know what? I don't think I really know enough about this to give advice, and I might need to get some help. And so, because Bob has recognised that, he's still intellectually virtuous. He's still got intellectual humility, but that has enabled him to recognise he needs to get some support. So it's about this balance between what I believe I know and what I actually know, what I believe I'm capable of doing and what I'm actually capable of doing. And wherever we can get those as closely aligned as possible, we will achieve intellectual humility. And that's the doxastic account that Dr. Ian Church has explained to us. Now, there's a bit in there which we haven't really covered, so I'll just mention this. He says non-culpably. So if we made a decision based on testimony, for example, or based on expert knowledge that somebody had shared with us, it would be reasonable. It would be reasonable in the right circumstances to believe that. Well, I think that's a good source of knowledge. But if that knowledge was incorrect, Bob wouldn't be culpable, and neither would we. So, that's what that means. So, given the best information in front of us, and our ability to perceive it, Bob can make a decision based on that will maintain his intellectual humility. Okay, now we've had a problem with knowledge, and when I say a problem, I don't necessarily mean that having knowledge is a problem, but our relationship with it as humans. So, and we've been thinking about this a long time. So you can go right back to Socrates, and Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So Socrates is basically saying, well, unless you look at what you do and what you think is important, there is literally, your life is not worth living, according to Socrates. Okay, so this chap here, my French ain't great, so if I get the pronunciation wrong, I apologize. But Michel de Montaigne, hopefully that's right. He was many different quotes about knowledge, and I've just chosen 3 there, which I think are quite relevant. The first one, then, he says, "The plague of man is boasting about his knowledge." Well, if we have a look at those accounts of intellectual humility, if they're correct, I think that Montaigne was talking about that. He was saying, well, you know, it's not right to say you know more than you do. Okay. Now, this one takes a bit more unpacking. It took me a while to get my head around this, so let's go through it then. Judgment can do without knowledge, but not knowledge without judgment. So what he's saying there is that for it to be knowledge, it needs to be based on appropriate judgment and justified judgments as well. And we're going to explore that a bit more as we go along. And right at the bottom there's no desire more natural than that of knowledge. And I think if you're a leader, or you're a health and safety professional, or you're somebody who makes decisions, knowledge is key, because you probably want to get those decisions right more often than not, and knowledge is going to help you achieve that. So another area where philosophers, there've been many, but there was quite a groundbreaking philosopher, a chap called Karl Popper. And Karl Popper mainly focused on the philosophy of science. And one of the things he was saying there was, he was saying that if we can't falsify, if the science can't be falsified, so if there's no way of disproving the science, it's a pseudoscience. So science, the judgments in science, their conclusions, we must be able to look at them and to question them, and actively try and question the conclusions of our experiments. Now, I believe that that's something we can learn. For example, say we do a risk assessment. Instead of coming up with our control measures and going, right, that's brilliant, yeah, we're all sorted now. I think we should learn from Popper and that scientific method of philosophical inquiry and question and say, well, okay, what's the counter evidence to me believing that this is the right way to do things? What other evidence is there? Not just look for evidence that backs up my conclusions, my control measures. Look for evidence that goes against them. And I think that can definitely help us in when we're making health and safety decisions. So he's talking about ignorance here. And we'll just remind you, those of you who managed to join last time, that understanding humility has been seen as a virtue for thousands of years. So on the left-hand side there, looking at the middle, is Plato, and one of his students was Aristotle. And the Greeks were really interested in this concept of virtue ethics. And what they were saying was, so if we take Bob as an example, we were saying that for Bob to be proper functioning in his role, and at the moment he's the health and safety manager, he has to be competent. As a health and safety manager, he must be able to fulfill the duties that is reasonably expected of a health and safety manager. And in order to do that, he has to be competent. And whilst Aristotle wasn't necessarily talking about Bob and health and safety managers, he was talking about any of us in our role. And he was talking about a virtuous person would be a person who would be proper functioning. So if we have a look at, and there are more virtues than these, some of the virtues that Aristotle said that we would need if we were going to be proper functioning. So he talked about courage, and obviously we're talking today in relation to intellectual humility. So intellectual courage, the courage to say, I don't know, the courage to say, I do know, and I'm going to stand by my convictions, and this is why. To be honest, to be truthful, I think we can all see how that's important in our roles. Humility. Obviously, we're talking about intellectual humility today. Proper ambition, so a real desire to get things right and to prove. And it's a never-ending journey, this, according to Aristotle. It's constant, and we never stop. Now, magnificence, I quite like that word. I think we are quite a magnificent profession. You may agree, you may disagree. Given the fact that health and safety managed in an appropriate way would allow people to do dangerous things and not get harmed, I think that's pretty magnificent, in my opinion anyway. So again, that's just an opinion. And what Aristotle did was, he said, well, what we're looking for is a balance in the middle. We don't want we don't want our virtues to become vices. And he said that if we have a deficiency of humility or courage or intellectual humility, then that would be a vice. On the other side, if we had an excess of intellectual humility or courage or honesty or truthfulness, etc., then that would also be a vice. So he's looking for this midline, which is really, if we go back to that graph that we had before, is really what we're saying is what we're saying about intellectual humility. It's somewhere in the middle between intellectual civility and intellectual arrogance. So we're just going to show another question now. So the question is, how good are you at doing your job? And hopefully it'll pop up on the screen in a moment. And I'd like you to answer as honestly as whatever you believe. Do you believe that you are in the top 25% of people in your role? Or do you believe you're average? Or what do you believe? Nobody knows, nobody's going to know that you said whatever you said, but genuinely, what do you believe? Hopefully that question will come up shortly through the poll. I'm just waiting for that to pop up. I'm trying not to influence your response by telling you about other research in this area. So there it is. How good are you at doing your job? So do you think you're right up there? I'm in the top 25%. I'm not average, but I reckon I'm between that sort of average and top 25%. Or I'm a bit below average, really. Or do you know what? I'm not very good at what I do. So it'd be interesting to see what it is that your response. And your response, whatever it is, isn't necessarily wrong. Whether you think you're in the top, you think you're in the middle, you think you're at the bottom, it's your belief, and that's what we're interested in. So hopefully we're working our way through that now. There we go, the results are going to come up. Right, okay, so if we have a look at that then, so we can see above average, and if we say 50% is average, we can see that we've got 63% of people on the webinar tonight are above average. Okay, so right, let's move on then. So what have we experienced recently? I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware of some issues. I think it was the 30th of June, so it's relatively recently, where a health and safety consultant was fined for giving incompetent advice. Now, there was quite a sort of, I don't know if it's chilling, but quite a poignant phrase on the HSE's website at the bottom, and that's on the right-hand side there, where health and safety consultants are found to be in breach of legislation, the HSE will hold persons to account for their failings. Now, that's interesting because I must admit, when you look on LinkedIn, the amount of experts out there is a lot of them. I've seen many people who are experts in behavioural safety, experts in this and experts in that. And do you know what? If you're an expert, brilliant. But are you really an expert? I don't know. I don't know if you're an expert. You can only gauge your own levels of intellectual humility. I think it's very difficult for somebody else to tell you you are this, you're in this part or that part, but it's something to consider. And it's also relevant for those of you who are who are members of IOSH. I'm sure there'll be some people who are here today and maybe some who are not. So they've got a code of conduct. I'm sure you know about that. I must admit, I'd read it in the past many years ago, but I went back and had another look at it earlier this week and had a look at that. And you can see there that there are four main areas: integrity, competence, respect, and service. And it comes back to this, and it's all those elements there will be dependent on your levels of intellectual humility. So have a read of it if you, I'm not going to go through each section. Have a read of it if you want to refamiliarize yourself and see what it's got to say. Okay. So when we look at knowledge itself, and some philosophers will say there's more than 3 types of knowledge. Some will say there's 4, and some may even argue with that. But if we just use 3 sort of common understandings of knowledge. So abilities is a form of knowledge. So I know how to do something, and the little picture there, that person there is has got the knowledge of how to play football, and so he can do it, and he does his keepy uppies or whatever he does, and he's developed knowledge in that area. Knowing who or what something is. So in its simplest of forms, I know what my house is. I know what it is. I know where it is, and I know what it looks like. So that would be acquaintance knowledge. But the one that we're really interested in is what we call factual or propositional knowledge. And that's the one we're going to explore in a bit more depth. So when we look at propositional knowledge, an example of that would be, I know when it's my birthday. And I'm reasonably confident on that. I've got a birth certificate, it says it on there. Everybody I know who family, they say, well, happy birthday on that day. So I've got lots of evidence that that is actually a piece of factual knowledge. Okay, but what do we mean by knowledge? So knowledge, I'm sure you're aware, philosophers call it, have this thing called epistemology. So basically that's a theory of knowledge. So a common definition of knowledge, and there are different ones, but one that we're going to use for today says that knowledge is a justified true belief. And in order for us to go through this, we're going to go back to our team and back to our workplace and get them to help us with this. So let's have a look then. So I don't know if you remember, there was our big factory come warehouse come distribution centre. And what we've got, unfortunately, one of our machines, one of our conveyor belts is broken. Unfortunately, it's got, and I have almost zero knowledge of engineering. So if I've technically got this wrong, I apologise. So we've got this thing with cogs and bits and bobs, and it whizzes around and it moves the conveyor belt along, and it's doing wonderfully well until one day it breaks. Oh no! So that's obviously going to cause us an issue because we need this conveyor belt so we can do our work. So what happens is 2 members of our team, they come together and they have a look at the issue. So there, hopefully you can see that, the big blue cog in the middle, it's been found to have some cracks in it, and the drive belt, if that's the right word, has been shown to break. We can see it's broken as well. So what's going to happen is our 2 main protagonists here, so we've got Bob and we've got Mary. They come together and they're having a chat about it. So Mary's saying blah, 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 you know, in blinking heck, it's broken. And, you know, what we're going to do, we've got orders. And Bob's going blah, blah, blah. And he's saying his bits. And he's saying, well, what about safety? You know, I mean, it's going to cause implications around the workplace, this is. So it's going to cause us problems. So one of the things that we need to consider now, and when we're looking at intellectual humility, is things that can affect our ability to attain knowledge. So you can see Mary there, she's got this thought, she's thinking how long will it take for it to be repaired and to get up and running. And Bob's over there. Bob, you know, Bob understands that these financial implications as well. And he's trying to think of what kind of equipment we might need to help us, you know, fix this fixes cope. So we're having a conversation about this, and as part of this conversation, Mary's saying, well, you know, I do see your point of view there, Bob, about the safety, but I think it will be safe. And what I'd like you to do is, I would like you to devise a system of work without us investing in some lifting equipment. And so Bob's got his hierarchy of control measures, and he's going to move down that hierarchy of controls now, and he's going to put in a safe system of work rather than an engineering control methods. And so there it is, there's his safe system of work. And so we've got this safe system of work, and now what we're going to do is we're going to recognize that the two protagonists that we've just got there don't have the same level of knowledge in their own areas of expertise. So if you just take that back a second, actually. Mary is an expert at planning and production management, but and finance, but she's not an expert in health and safety. Now we look at Bob, and Bob is an expert in health and safety. He's been doing it many years. Or is he an expert? Well, he's definitely more knowledgeable than Mary is. If we had a look at, if we brought Luca in, well, that's slightly different, because we can compare the levels of knowledge and the level of experience and their abilities in regard of safety. Luca is on a more of an equal level. He's done lots of qualifications, and he's been doing the job a long while as well. So if those two had a disagreement, or were talking about it, they're on the same level to start with. And we'll talk about how we might manage that shortly. Okay, so there we go, there's our bits again. So what happens is Luca, he gets our electrical engineer, and remember that Marcus is experienced, he's done his full apprenticeship, he's fully qualified, and he's actually got experience on the job. Luca shows Marcus the health and safety policies and procedures about repairing this piece of broken equipment. So he turns up, he's got his spanners, and he's got his spare bits, and Marcus is showing excellent intellectual humility here, because he's recognised, excuse me, he's recognised that he might actually get this wrong. So what does he do? He pulls out his situational awareness tool. He's been told to have a look at this when he does something he's not used to, or he thinks it could be a problem in a dangerous job, and he has a look at it. And when he gets it out, he's having a look, and he thinks, he's going back to his safe system of work, and he can see that there's a problem. You can see that actually it's not safe. So what does he do? He's been told, he does what he's told. He goes and speaks to Bob. At this then. So I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation like that. Maybe we should have done a poll, but okay. So where we are is we have some knowledge. Well, okay, so let's look at knowledge in more depth. And so the knowledge is what both Mary and Bob believe. They believe something, and they believe they have knowledge, enough knowledge to make a decision. So let's have a look at the three elements of the definition of knowledge. So they both have a belief that the system of work is safe and the most appropriate one to do. Okay, so that's the first tick in our elements of knowledge. So let's have a look at some of the other ones then. Is it a justified belief? Well, if we look at Mary, is Mary in a position to justifiably believe that this system of work is safe? And I'll let you come to your own conclusions on that. And Bob as well. Is Bob justified in his belief Well, Bob is more experienced, but has he really considered all the different elements that, as he looked at his control measures and as he said to himself, could I be wrong? Where's the evidence to say that I could be wrong, that these control measures will be followed or won't be followed? One thing I will say is Marcus followed a control measure of using his situational awareness tool. Well done, Marcus. Okay, and the third thing that we've got to have is it true? Is the job done this way actually safe? Well, we've got a problem with these because truth, we don't know whether it's true until after the fact, until after the job. So it doesn't become knowledge if we don't know something is true. It could be true, but that will be after the fact, and that's in hindsight. So it can't be knowledge because we don't know it's true when we design the system of work and ask people to do it. Okay, and is it justified? Well, we briefly mentioned that, so I'm not going to go any more on that at the moment. So where do we get our justification from and our knowledge from? Well, we get it from testimony. People tell us things. Testimony, we read things, we look at the HSC's website, we look at IOSH, keep on top of what they're telling us about things to keep our eyes open for and safe ways of doing things. We look at that, and part of one of the ways we do that is through training. First person experience. Well, I think we probably, in the scenario that we've got there, Mary hasn't got that much first person experience of this, knowing that this job is safe. So she can't really go back to her memory, and she can't sort of address cultural norms really. Now, if we look at Bob, does have first person experience, and we'll look at that in a bit more depth in a moment. Now, one of the things that we need to be mindful of is about bias. Now, many of you may have read this book. I don't know if you have. I met many people in the health and safety industry or leaders who have. And Daniel Kahneman was, and Tversky, there were Nobel Prize winners, and they were really looking at behavioral economics. I think that's what they won their Nobel Prize for. And they were talking about this different types of thinking. System one, first reaction, and their research told them that was used many times. That was used, and in their research, 95% of decisions are made using system one. When we think about the scenario that we've got with the broken piece of machinery, I think we probably would like to justify our knowledge through reasoning and reflective deliberation, analysing the evidence, and that would use system two. And according to their research, that's used quite infrequently. So one of the things that we can now do now is we can go back and look at our, I see I've spelled beliefs wrong. Right, okay. We can go back and look at our beliefs and find out whether they are beliefs, whether they're justified and whether they're true, and the effect of cognitive bias on that. There's quite a few biases there, and if anyone's ever looked at these and tried to learn them all, there are loads. And I've attempted to learn them and failed. So now I know I can't learn them, my memory's not good enough, and I think, oh, that seems like it might be biased, and then I go and look it up because I know I can't remember it. But one of the things that I think we do, there's two interesting ones, well, there's three interesting ones there. One of them is an overconfidence bias, where we believe that our ability to make decisions is greater than it actually is in reality. Okay. We've got confirmation bias, when we may come up with a system of work or a method statement or something like that, and we're looking for evidence to confirm that what we've done is right. Yeah, that's it. And yeah, there's the evidence. I was right. I think we need to look for evidence that tells us why we might be wrong. I think we can learn from Popper there. And there's one called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which you may have heard of. So we'll briefly look at that. So it's a cognitive bias. It's relatively recent. I think it's 1999, where psychologists, Dunning and Kruger, they did some research and they came across this bias. And basically what it means is that it's common for people to wrongly overestimate their knowledge or ability. Now, it doesn't mean that's all areas. It doesn't mean that we're always wrong at estimating our abilities or our knowledge, but in some areas we can do that. Okay, what else did we say then? Well, because of that, because we have this overestimation of our ability, then that reduces our ability to see that we were wrong, because we lack the knowledge to realize to be competent. That lack of knowledge is also going to affect our ability to realize that we're not competent. So you can see how that is that can be a problem. Okay, and that's what it says in the last paragraph there. That there's an irony about it. The knowledge and intelligence we need to know that we might be wrong, through the Dunning-Kruger effect, we need to have that knowledge to tell us that we might be wrong, because we haven't got it. We can't see that we might be wrong, and we might have overestimated our abilities. Okay, so I just had a little look out there on the internet, and there's loads of different uses of this Dunning-Kruger effect there, and if it's something that you wanted to maybe discuss with your teams and see whether it was present or bias in your workplace, then you know, there's some great graphics, and there's an example of one there. Okay. So we were talking about where we might get our evidence from. Testimony, so people telling us things. Two great Scottish philosophers here, Thomas Reid, he said, well, we should believe everybody, and we should believe everybody all the time. Whereas the complete opposite of that was David Hume. You can see the contemporaries by their birth dates and at the top there. He said, no, that's wrong. No, you shouldn't believe anything that anybody says unless you've got first-hand testimony, unless you've experienced it yourself. So, okay. So we can see here that Marcus came and gave testimony to Bob and said, I think there's a problem. But Bob decided that that testimony of Marcus on this occasion wasn't good enough justification to change the way that he was doing things. And that's the problem. Another issue that we can have with testimony is that we can have disagreements. So Bob thinks that we ought to get ourselves some kind of lifting device, and Mary thinks, well, no, we don't need that. Well, what's really important for us is efficiency and getting it back up and running so we don't lose money. Now, Bob has got some tools to help him. Bob's got some tools. He's got guidance from the Health and Safety Executive and other organisations to help him justify his knowledge. But has he got time to go back and read all that? Has he kept himself up to date? Because I know I don't. I can't remember everything I've ever read. Maybe you can. I know I can't. Whereas Mary, on the other hand, she's got a source of evidence that what she believes, her knowledge, what she believes is her knowledge, she's got stats on how much money we're going to lose and productivity and things like that. Okay. So when we've got disagreements, there are three main options. The first thing is we can hold steadfast and say, no, I'm not going to change my mind. I believe this, and you know, I'm definitely not going to change my mind. We can listen to what the other people say, and we may decide to, so conciliation, we might decide, well, I see what you've got to say there. Okay, well, I'll take into account and understand your point of view, and I might, we might adapt what I originally felt I wasn't going to adapt. My knowledge, I'm going to adjust my knowledge based on that conciliation. Or I could concede, okay, Mary, whatever you say, let's do it. Now, the thing is, whenever we think about testimony and think about disagreement, we need to understand that not everybody looks at the problem in the same way. If Mary had a pair of glasses on, with a different coloured lens, her colour of her lens would be slightly different than Bob's, because she's looking at it from a different point of view. She might interpret the issue in a different way. She may have different values. She may give more importance or weight on the issue. She may use different methods of reasoning. She may have come from a different background that looks at issues like this in different ways. Okay, so how do we develop it then? Well, what we'd really like is if we could get Bob to move from his initial position, which we had right at the beginning, where he had demonstrated intellectual arrogance, if we can get him to move towards the intellectual humility, and you can see he's quite high on that there, maybe increase his knowledge, refresh his knowledge, and give him the ability to make decisions based on his actual knowledge. Okay, Mary, her intellectual humility on the situation, the example that we've given, for her to demonstrate that was to realise that actually I don't know very much about safety of machinery. And I recognise that, and she would be there. And when we look at Marcus, Marcus, when he went to see Bob and he said, oh, I think we've got a problem, but he didn't hold steadfast, he changed, said, okay, we'd like him to move from his intellectual civility. We'd like him to say, listen, you know, Bob, and I know that can be a challenge with a manager. Bob, you know, you really do have to listen to me here because it's, you know, I'm absolutely sure it's not safe. Okay. So what do we do next? Where do we go with this? Well, as with most philosophical and psychological study, not all, but it's done by people who don't do what we do. And what do we need? Well, I think we're going to have to look at this subject in greater detail. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you to the team from Inthum. They were brilliant, and if we could do a round of applause, we'll give them a round of applause, and we're going to move on to some questions. Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully that was of some use, and we haven't got that much time, but if there are any questions, if you could please, I'll go through them. So I'm just going to mute myself.
Simon, thank you very much for your presentation. For those of you who are listening now, you've got the opportunity, if you haven't already, to post any questions that you may have. Please use the Q&A panel. I think we have about 7 minutes left, so we could certainly get a couple in. And while we're launching the poll, Simon, if I could just tell you your first question is intellectual humility measurable? And is a large factor in that measurement the ego of the individual?
Right, I'm just going to unmute that. As with most philosophical and scientific areas, there is dispute about this, but there are some great brains out there who are trying to come up with valid means of measuring. And some people would say that they've achieved a good standard, but I still think we've got a long way to go. It's a relatively new subject of our area of inquiry, this. Thank you very much for the question. Any others, James?
No, there is some thanks coming through for the quality of the lecture, so that's always good to know. Let me just check the chat to make sure somebody hasn't posted a question in the chat. No, it doesn't look like there is, so that's fantastic, but there is a few congratulations and lots of thanks.
Good.
So, Simon, if you have completed, I can finish this webinar off if you like.
Okay, I would like to just say something, if that's possible. What I would like to do going forward, and if anyone is interested and would like to get involved, I would like to explore intellectual humility within the health and safety industry in greater detail. And I can't do it on my own. Even if I was capable on my own, it wouldn't be a very good exploration. I need people to help me with this. And if anybody would like to get involved, I'd like to put together a bit of a team. Put people, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 of us. And the idea is we do some work, we do some research, and together we would create some kind of an outcome. What that exactly looks like, I don't definitely know. I would imagine it'd be a piece that we'd offer to the IOSH magazine or to SHP or something like that. But if anybody would like to get involved in that, please get in touch. I don't know if you can see my email address. Hold on, if I do the next one. No, you can't see my email. I'm out of control now, as you can see. Yeah, okay. Right, go to, I'll tell you, Simon at ouch, T for Tango, .co.uk, if you are interested in getting involved. Okay.
Just so you know, Simon, your email was on the last slide that you had up.
Oh, was it? I couldn't see
yeah.
because the quiz thing was blocking it.
We have approximately 3 or 4 minutes left. So depending on how confident you are, Simon, I have 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay, great. Yeah.
When does intellectual humility become a negative hindrance?
Well, intellectual humility, what the doxastic view is that it isn't and it can't be negative. Being aware of your own limitations can't be negative because it gives you then the opportunity to make decisions based on reality rather than something which isn't reality. And if you believe that you are better or worse than you are, that could have an impact on your decisions going forward, either to not do something or do something.
Fantastic. And then we've probably got about 60 seconds left to last another one. Isn't intellectual humility a recipe for indecision? Most of the clients they deal with don't want indecision.
What intellectual humility isn't about that, I'll be honest, it isn't. If you do make a decision, you need to be confident that you've put the time, effort in to ensure that the knowledge that's going to inform your decision is of a good enough value. If it is, make the decision. If it isn't, don't. So we're not saying being indecisive, we're saying being aware of what you actually know.
Perfect. Simon, thank you very much. We are into our last minute or so here. So I would just like to end this session by thanking Simon and to all those who joined us today for our webinar. We'll be sending out a link to the presentation to the email addresses that you have registered with. There were a couple of unanswered questions to you, and we will answer those and get the answers to those questions to you. But thank you all very much for listening, and we shall end this webinar here. A good evening to you all.
Thank you very much for organising it, James, and you know, I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. Okay, bye.